Okay, picture this for a second. You wake up, and your entire city has just been reduced to rubble overnight. Families are completely torn apart, and the actual fate of humanity is hanging by a thread. Welcome to This Explainer. We're diving right into the complete story of World War II. Between 1939 and 1945, over 100 million people were mobilized across the globe in a conflict that completely rewired the modern era. 60 million. I want you to just let that staggeringly huge number sink in for a moment. More than 60 million people lost their lives during these 6 years. It's the deadliest conflict in all of human history. The sheer scale of that loss is almost impossible to wrap your head around, but it's the grim reality of what happened when the world descended into total chaos. So here is exactly how the war unfolded. First, we'll look at the seeds of conflict, then blitzkrieg and early conquests, how the war goes global, the turning of the tide, victory and devastation, and finally, the Holocaust and legacy. Part 1, the seeds of conflict. To really grasp why this massive war even happened, we've got to rewind the clock back to 1918, the end of World War I. Germany had been defeated and was forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles. And man, this treaty was absolutely crushing. They had to take total blame for the war, pay out these massive financial reparations, slash their military, and give up their territories. It was deeply humiliating for everyday Germans. Now add skyrocketing inflation, where people's life savings were literally wiped out overnight, and the Great Depression in 1929, you've got a nation that is economically crippled and totally desperate. And right in the middle of all this incredible suffering, Adolf Hitler steps up, promising to bring back Germany's lost glory. How does he do it? Well, step 1, he blames the country's economic ruin on foreign powers, political opponents, and minority groups. It was a classic scapegoat tactic, but his speeches start attracting millions of desperate listeners. This leads straight to step 3. He gets appointed Chancellor of Germany in 1933. Almost immediately, he starts systematically transforming the nation into a dictatorship. He's arresting opponents, completely ending free speech, and rapidly building up the military. His ultimate goal? A massive German empire. Part 2, Blitzkrieg and early conquests. Now, Germany wasn't the only one making aggressive moves here. You got Benito Mussolini looking to build a new Roman empire over in Italy. And Japan was already making massive power plays in Asia. They invaded Manchuria in 1931 and launched a full-scale invasion of China by 1937, committing truly horrific atrocities like the Nanjing Massacre. Meanwhile, leaders in Europe are practically begging for diplomacy, hoping to avoid another war. But this unchecked momentum is just building and building. In 1936, German troops march into the Rhineland. By 1938, they annex Austria. That same year, European leaders actually give Hitler the Sudetenland in the Munich Agreement in this desperate attempt to just keep the peace. But, you guessed it, peace didn't last. By 1939, Germany swallows up the rest of Czechoslovakia. All that diplomatic hesitation, it just poured gasoline on his ambitions. The world finally wakes up and realizes Hitler is absolutely not going to stop. So, September 1, 1939, Germany invades Poland, and they unleash this terrifying new tactic, Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. It was exactly what it sounds like, a completely devastating high-speed military tactic. You've got aircraft bombing cities from above, while tanks and motorized infantry just smash through defenses on the ground with unprecedented speed. The Polish resistance fought incredibly hard, but they were just overwhelmed. 2 days later, the UK and France say enough is enough, and they declare war. World War II has officially kicked off. And the pace of this German advance, it was mind-boggling. In 1940, Hitler unleashed a series of rapid-fire offensives that totally shocked the globe. Denmark fell in a matter of hours. Norway, the Netherlands, and Belgium are all quickly defeated. And then Germany pivots right toward France. Now, the French leaders thought their super heavily fortified Maginot Line was going to keep them safe. Instead, the German forces literally just went around it, driving straight through the Ardennes forest. The collapse was stunning. Millions of people had to flee their homes. Paris was occupied in just weeks. And suddenly, you look at the map, and only Britain is left standing in Western Europe. Now, Hitler knew that if he was going to invade Britain, he absolutely had to control the skies. Enter the Battle of Britain. German bombers are just relentlessly pounding British airfields, factories, and cities. But Britain refuses to cave. The Royal Air Force fights back fiercely in these crazy dogfights that drug on for months. And here's a wild detail. They used this cutting-edge new technology called radar to track incoming attacks. It was an absolute game changer that not only saved Britain, but shaped the tech you and I use today. All the while, Winston Churchill is keeping the nation's spirit alive with these legendary speeches, and ultimately, Hitler suffers his first major defeat. Part 3. The war goes global. So Britain held the line, but 1941 is the year this conflict mutates into a truly worldwide catastrophe. In June, Hitler launches Operation Barbarossa. We're talking about the largest invasion in human history. 3 million German soldiers push into the Soviet Union. They're making massive gains at first, but then they hit a brick wall, a freezing, brutal Russian winter they were entirely unequipped for. Vehicles literally froze solid, and massive Soviet counterattacks stalled the whole operation. Then, fast forward just a few months to December. Over in the Pacific, tensions over oil sanctions finally boil over. Japan launches a devastating surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Battleships are sunk and over 2,400 Americans are killed. The U.S. immediately declares war on Japan, Germany declares war on the U.S., and just like that, the entire globe is engulfed in fire. Part 4. The Turning of the Tide. For years, the Axis powers seemed literally unstoppable. Until 1942. 4. That's the number of heavily relied upon Japanese aircraft carriers the U.S. managed to completely destroy during the Battle of Midway in the Pacific. It was this massive, crippling blow that abruptly shattered Japan's naval dominance. And right around the exact same time, deep in the Soviet Union, 90,000. That's how many German troops finally surrendered in February 1943. They had been fighting this horrific, brutal, street-by-street battle in Stalingrad for months, until the entire city was just a wasteland. Cut off, freezing, and totally surrounded, the German army's surrender there became the massive turning point of the war in Europe. Building on that huge momentum, the Allies launched the largest amphibious invasion ever attempted. June 6, 1944. D-Day. Over 150,000 Allied troops crossed the English Channel, backed by massive naval and air support, to storm the beaches of Normandy, Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword. These guys were facing horrific, withering machine gun fire before they even reached cover. Yet, against all odds, they pulled it off. The invasion succeeded. They opened up a vital new Western front, essentially trapping Germany in a vice grip between the Allies in the West and an advancing Soviet army in the East. Part 5. Victory and Devastation. By early 1945, the writing was on the wall. The situation for the Axis was totally desperate. Entire cities are in ruins, and fuel and supplies are just gone. The end in Europe finally comes as Soviet forces literally battle their way through the shattered streets of Berlin. On April 30, 1945, Hitler retreats to his underground bunker and dies. Days later, Germany officially surrenders unconditionally, and victory in Europe is declared. But honestly, the relief was pretty short-lived because on the other side of the planet, a horrific conclusion was still playing out in the Pacific. Japan was still fiercely determined to fight to the bitter end. Fearing a ground invasion would cost millions of American and Japanese lives, military planners decide to use the results of a top-secret initiative called the Manhattan Project. They had developed a revolutionary, terrifying new weapon. On August 6, an atomic bomb is dropped on Hiroshima, wiping out much of the city in a flash. 3 days later, a second bomb hits Nagasaki. This was a scale of sheer devastation humanity had never, ever witnessed before. Facing utter destruction, Japan officially surrenders on August 15, 1945. World War II was finally over. Part 6. The Holocaust and Legacy. With the guns silent at last, the full, harrowing scope of what really happened over those 6 years was laid bare to the world. And we need to take a second here and just pause to acknowledge the absolute darkest chapter of this conflict. 6 million. The Nazi regime systematically persecuted and martyred approximately 6 million Jewish people in concentration and extermination camps. These places became the ultimate horrific symbols of unimaginable cruelty. And we also have to remember the millions of others who were targeted for persecution and death alongside them. Political prisoners, disabled individuals, Roman communities, they were all subjected to immense suffering and systematic murder. It's a truly staggering loss of human life, an atrocity that the world must never forget. So, what does this all mean for us today? Well, the conflict fundamentally rewired the modern world. The old empires crumbled, and totally new global superpowers rose up to take their place. Out of the ashes of this war, the United Nations was created, basically as a global promise to try and prevent anything like this from ever happening again. Plus, the sheer pressure of the war sent human technology into overdrive, leading to massive, rapid advances in aviation, modern medicine, and of course, the dawn of the nuclear age. In the end, the story of World War II is so much more than just troop movements and changing borders on a map. It's a story of profound courage, of immense, heartbreaking sacrifice, and of survival against literally the darkest of odds. More than 80 years later, it still stands as a stark warning about the terrible cost of hatred and unchecked power. So the question we have to ask ourselves now is this: will we remember the terrible cost? It's a challenge to all of us to make sure we carry these lessons forward. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.